3 months ago, I was curled up behind a diner on the south side of Chicago, wrapped in a torn garbage bag like it was armor, begging the sky to hold off for just one more hour. Rain had a way of finding every weak seam. So did life? My name is Emily Ward. I'm 29 years old, and by the time winter really set in, I'd already watched my entire world get erased: my home, my job, my marriage, even the people I thought were mine. I used to believe life followed rules. Do the right thing, show up, be loyal, love people hard, and somehow, in the end, you'd be okay. That belief didn't survive my sister. Her name is Claire. Older than me, prettier than me, according to everyone who ever tried to comfort me by pretending it didn't matter. She was the kind of person who could walk into a room and make strangers feel chosen. The kind of person who could take what she wanted and still be praised for being strong. And my husband, Ethan Hale, was supposed to be the one safe place I had left for years. My life looked like something I'd earned. At 27. I'd made senior strategist at Lux Edge Marketing, corner desk, glass walls, a view that made you feel important even when you weren't. I had a reputation for being thorough to meticulous, they said, which is corporate language for hard to frame. Every morning, Ethan would press a quick kiss to my forehead while I hunted for my keys. And he'd hand me coffee exactly the way I liked it: strong, with just enough cream to cut the bite. Little rituals that convince you you're loved. Claire had always been part of it, too. She helped me plan my wedding. She cried during her toast. She called Ethan the brother she never had, like it was endearing. Looking back, that's what makes it so sick. She didn't crash into my life like a stranger would. She walked in like family. It started quietly, the way betrayal always does when it wants to be believed. Ethan began working late. Then he started coming home with a faint citrus scent clinging to his collar. Not my shampoo. Not the detergent we used. Claire's perfume, the one she wore like a signature. She began showing up at our apartment more often, always with some harmless excuse. I'm in the neighborhood. I brought wine. Ethan mentioned his laptop was acting up. I saw it. I did. But when the people hurting you are the same ones you defend with your last breath, your brain performs miracles to keep the peace. You call it stress. You call it coincidence. You call it anything but what it actually is. Then one morning, my boss at Lux Edge asked me to step into her office. She didn't offer coffee. That's how I knew. Emily, she said. Careful the way people get when they're about to drop something fragile and pretend it wasn't their fault. We've received complaints, irregularities, account discrepancies. I actually laughed because it was so absurd. My numbers are clean. She slid a folder across her desk like she didn't want to touch it. Inside were invoices I'd never seen, fake vendor payments, approvals stamped with my name, signatures mimicked well enough to fool someone who wanted to be fooled. I'm sorry, she said. The partners want you to take a leave of absence while we investigate. A leave of absence. Corporate language for you're done. But we'd like you to exit quietly so we can call you unstable later. I went home shaking so hard I could barely fit my key into the lock. And there they were, Ethan and Claire, sitting on my couch like it belonged to them, relaxed, almost bored, as if they'd been waiting for the scene to begin. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table. Tell me this is a mistake. Claire didn't flinch. She crossed her legs slowly, the way she always did when she felt powerful. It's not personal, Em, she said, smiling like she was being kind. You were just in the way. In the way of what? My voice came out thin, like air leaking from something punctured. My future, she said. And then, without even looking at me, Ethan added, you're overreacting. You always do. That was the moment the marriage died. Not with screaming. Not with confession. With dismissal. I tried to pack that night. But once you realize the floor beneath you is owned by someone else, you stop knowing where to put your feet. 2 days later, Lux Edge terminated me pending evidence. My badge was deactivated. My work email shut off. My company phone turned into a brick. The apartment lease co-signed by Ethan was canceled due to a change in occupancy. Within a week, I was locked out of my own life like I'd never existed at all. I called my parents in Oregon, desperate for something solid, but Claire had already laid the groundwork. When my mom finally answered, her voice was tight, strange like she'd been coached. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "maybe you should get help. That word followed me for weeks like an accusation. Not come home. Not we believe you. Just help like I was the problem, not the target. And when you lose the people who are supposed to be your emergency exit, panic becomes a long-term residence." The first night I slept in my car, I told myself it was temporary. A bridge, a rough patch. I still had my degree, my resume. My pride. Reality doesn't negotiate with pride. By the second week, my car battery died. I sat in the dark, watching frost creep across the inside of the windshield. And I realized something sharp and humiliating. No one was coming. I pawned my engagement ring for $80. $80 for what I'd once thought was forever. It bought me to nights in a motel that smelled like bleach and old cigarettes, and a few gas station meals I ate slowly to pretend they were enough. When the money ran out, I started rotating shelters, timing my life around meal lines and bathroom access, telling myself stories to stay human. I'm between places. I lost my wallet. I'm waiting on a call. Homelessness isn't always dramatic. People imagine sirens and shouting and chaos. Sometimes it's just silence long. Heavy silence because the world has decided you're not part of it anymore. You stop making eye contact because you can feel people choosing not to see you. A young woman in worn clothes doesn't fit anyone's favorite kind of tragedy. Too old to be a lost kid. Too young to be a poor elderly soul. Just inconvenient. One night, outside a grocery store, someone said my name. Emily? I turned, and for a second my heart jumped like rescue had arrived. It was Mrs. Patterson, an old client from Lux Edge. Her face softened when she recognized me, then tightened when she saw the state I was in. Her hand clutched her shopping bag a little closer, like my misfortune was contagious. "Oh, honey," she murmured. I heard what happened. Her sympathy lasted exactly 3 seconds before it curdled into discomfort. That was the night I learned something worse than hunger exists. Shame. By January, I dropped 20 pounds and most of my hope. I kept an old work notebook stuffed in my bag, the kind with meeting notes and strategy frameworks. At night, I'd flip through it and trace my handwriting, trying to convince myself that woman had been real. The woman who spoke in conference rooms without shaking. The woman with a future. She felt like a character I used to play. Then the snowstorm hit. The temperature sank to 14 degrees. My car was long gone towed after I couldn't move it. I ended up behind that diner, using plastic bags for insulation. My only blanket damp at the edges. My teeth wouldn't stop chattering. My hands were numb. I remember thinking, very calmly, that it might be easier if I just let my eyes close and didn't fight for morning. That's when a voice cut through the dark. "You'll die out here." "Sweetheart." An older woman stood a few feet away, wrapped in a red coat, her breath fogging white in the frozen air. She looked like someone's grandmother, but her eyes were alert, trained on me with purpose. She held out a paper cup of coffee. "My name is Sister Marianne," she said. "I volunteer with a shelter nearby." I didn't even have energy to be suspicious. She pressed a small card into my palm. The ink had smudged slightly from the cold. "Street Mercy Shelter, 1430 to Jefferson Street. Go," she said. "They won't turn you away." I stared at the card long after she disappeared into the snow. Mercy. The word felt like a joke. Mercy was for people the world still cared about. But when dawn came, my fingers were bluish and my body was shaking in a way that didn't feel like cold anymore. It felt like quitting. So I walked for miles through dirty snow and slush that soaked through my boots. Every breath scraped my throat. Every step felt like dragging something heavier than my body, like dragging my entire past behind me. When I Finally saw the faded red sign St. Mercy. I thought I'd reached the end of my story. I didn't understand. I just stepped into the part that had been waiting for me my whole life. Inside, the air smelled like bleach and burnt coffee cleaning and exhaustion layered together. A line of people stood clutching plastic bags and duffel sacks, eyes down, shoulders hunched in practiced patience. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow that didn't quite manage to look cheerful. When it was my turn, the woman at the desk didn't look up at first. Her badge read Joyce Mallory. Intake supervisor. Name? She asked automatically, fingers poised over the keyboard. Emily Ward. My voice sounded strange, like I hadn't used it in days. I handed her my ID. Her fingers stopped mid-motion. Not just a pause, a full-body freeze. The kind you see when someone recognizes a face they weren't expecting to encounter. Outside a nightmare. She looked at the screen, then at me, then at the screen again. Date of birth? She asked, but her voice had changed. April 9th. 1990-6. Her mouth parted slightly, like she was trying to breathe through shock. And place of birth? Portland, Oregon. Her chair scraped back hard as she stood too quickly. Just wait here. One moment. Before I could ask what was wrong, she hurried through a door behind the desk. Someone in line behind me muttered, half joking, "Guess you got flagged." I tried to laugh, but my stomach had already started to drop. Then I heard it. The sharp, unmistakable click of a lock. Joyce had bolted the front door from the inside. She came back a minute later looking pale, her hands trembling as she pulled down the blinds one by one. The lobby dimmed. The room shifted from shelter intake to something controlled. People started murmuring. Moss single quotes AM? I asked, throat tight. Is there a problem? Joyce picked up the phone with the seriousness of someone calling in a fire. This is intake station 12, she said, voice low. Authorization code 7, Alpha 9. I stopped breathing. We found her, Joyce continued. Emily Ward? Confirmed. A pause. Then her face tightened as she listened. Yes. Locking down now. She hung up slowly, eyes never leaving mine. Found me? I whispered. Found me for what? Joyce didn't answer right away. Instead, she unlocked a drawer beneath the desk and pulled out a thick manila folder wrapped in red tape. On the front, in block letters, were words I wasn't supposed to see. Testament program. Subject 9. Classified. My skin went cold in a way the weather had never managed. Joyce opened it and slid a photograph toward me. It was a little girl 3. Maybe 4, staring straight at the camera. On her left shoulder was a crescent-shaped birthmark. The same one I've had my entire life. I don't know why I lifted my sleeve right then, but I did. Like my body needed to confirm what my mind refused to accept. The crescent stared back at me from my own skin. Joyce swallowed hard. Emily, according to this file. You shouldn't exist. My mouth went dry. That's impossible. Joyce turned another page. A birth certificate printed on old paper. Official stamps faded with time. Name? Lydia Cross. Date of birth? April 9, 1996. Mother? Dr. Evelyn Cross, biochemist. Testament Research Facility. Father? Classified. My hands went numb. That's my birthday? I whispered, like saying it out loud would make it less real. I know. Joyce said softly. I shoved the folder back like it could burn me. My parents are David and Margaret Ward. I grew up in Portland. I went to Lincoln Elementary. I have memories. Joyce leaned forward, her voice gentler now, like she was speaking to someone in shock. Emily, those people raised you, but they weren't your biological parents. They were assigned guardians. Assigned. The word tasted wrong. Joyce flipped again, revealing a report with a grainy black and white photo. A damaged building. Smoke billowing. Emergency lights cutting through darkness. 25 years ago, there was an explosion at a research facility, she said. 2 confirmed dead. 1 child missing. Officially, that child didn't survive. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. That child was me, I said. But it didn't sound like a statement. It sounded like someone else's nightmare. Joyce reached into the folder and pulled out a small silver locket. The metal was scratched, like it had been dragged through rubble. She left this, Joyce said quietly. It was recovered at the site. Inside was a tiny photo. A young woman in a lab coat. Dark hair pulled back, smiling down at a baby. The baby had my eyes. I stared until my vision blurred. You're telling me my whole life, my name, my family was a cover. Joyce's eyes glistened. Not a lie. A hiding place. My chest tightened so hard it felt like my ribs were shrinking. Why would anyone need to hide me? Joyce's phone buzzed. She answered, listened, and whatever she heard drained the last bit of color from her face. Understood, she murmured, and hung up. She looked at me like she was trying to memorize my face before something took me away. They're coming, she said. Who? Federal agents, Joyce replied. 2 teams, 1 official, and 1 that isn't. My throat closed. What does that mean? It means some people have been trying to protect you for a very long time. And some people don't want you alive. I grabbed the folder again, fingers digging into the paper. What did my mother do? Joyce hesitated, then opened the technical pages, charts, medical terms, trial numbers. It read like a science textbook and a crime scene at the same time. Project Testament was a biogenetics program, she said. The goal was to engineer resilient immune systems that don't fail. Bodies that heal faster than medicine can explain. Resistance to toxins. Even dramatically slowed aging. I stared at her. That's insane. It's real, Joyce said. 7 children were born into the program. 6 died before they turned 5. My voice dropped to a whisper. And the 7th? Joyce held my gaze. You? The room seemed to tilt beneath me. And my mother? I asked, barely getting the words out. Joyce nodded toward the photo of the lab. The smoke, the wreckage. When Dr. Cross learned the project was being handed off to private defense contractors, she tried to end it, Joyce said. She destroyed the research, burned the files, and staged your death. She wanted to make sure no one could reproduce what they'd done to you. I looked down at the locket again, at her smile, and a new kind of pain spread through me, one I couldn't name yet. She died protecting me. I whispered. Joyce didn't correct me. Her silence was the answer. And somewhere outside those locked doors, footsteps were getting closer. People who had been searching for me for 25 years. Finally close enough to touch what they'd lost. Or what they still believe they owned. She didn't just erase the research, Joyce said, voice thick. She left instructions. Joyce reached to the back of the folder and pulled out a single sheet creased, scanned, then stapled to an evidence tag. The handwriting looked rushed, like it had been written with shaking hands. To whoever finds her, raise her as your own. Never tell her what she is. If they learn she survived, they will come. The room seemed to contract around me. I dragged a hand through my hair, nails scraping my scalp like it could wake me up. So my entire life, every memory, it was all built to keep me hidden. Joyce didn't deny it. She just looked exhausted. It kept you alive. Then she swallowed and said, Emily, there's more. She flipped to the final section. Newer paper, newer ink. Not burned edges and faded stamps like the rest. These pages were clean, recent. Across the top, in red, was a title that made my stomach clench. Helio Biosystems, Testament Revival Initiative. I stared at it like it might change if I blinked. Helio. What is this? A continuation, Joyce said. Someone purchased what was left, patents, fragments, anything that survived. They've been hunting for original genetic material for years. My throat tightened. Original meaning me. Joyce nodded once. That's why the missing child case never closed. You weren't a tragedy to them. You were unfinished inventory. I read the name again, trying to place why it felt familiar, why it made my skin crawl. And then it hit me so hard my vision flashed white. Helio. I whispered. That's Ethan's company. Joyce's brows shot up. Your husband. Ex-husband. I corrected, the word tasting like rust. He works under his father, Richard Hale. Ethan always claimed they were biomedical logistics shipping, tech support, compliance, boring corporate work. Joyce's face hardened in a way that told me the boring story was a lie. Richard Hale was connected to the original funding pool, she said. One of the early investors. If he's revived the program under Helio. This didn't start when your marriage fell apart. My chest went cold. Ethan hadn't stumbled into my life and betrayed me later. He'd been standing at the door of my life the whole time, waiting for the right moment to open it and sell what was inside. All the coincidences rearranged themselves in my head into a pattern. The fake invoices, the sudden firing, the lease cancellation, Claire poisoning my parents against me, pushing me out of every safe place until I had nowhere left to disappear. They weren't just ruining my reputation. They were stripping away my cover. I slammed my palm on the table hard enough to sting. They flushed me out. Joyce's answer was quiet, and it worked. Something sharp rose inside me, hotter than fear, cleaner than grief. Where are they now? I asked. Joyce opened her mouth to respond. And the world outside answered first. Headlights swept across the blinds like searchlights. The low rumble of engines rolled through the shelter walls. Someone in the lobby gasped. Joyce's voice dropped to a near whisper. Emily, they're here. My blood turned to ice. Who? She held my eyes, trembling now. Your husband, your sister, and the man who built the machine that killed your mother. The overhead lights flickered once, twice, like the building itself was bracing for impact. Joyce hurried to the window and lifted one blind slat just a fraction. Her face drained. 3 SUVs. I stepped beside her and looked. Outside, black vehicles lined the curb, too coordinated to be coincidence. Men in suits moved with purpose earpieces, gloved hands. The calm posture of people who expect compliance. And then I saw the 3 figures at the center of it all. Ethan first, confident, polished, wearing the same controlled smile he used at dinner parties. Claire beside him, perfect hair, expensive coat. I realized with a sick jolt she was wearing my old coat, the one she'd borrowed years ago and never returned. And behind them, taller, older, silver-haired, posture like a CEO addressing shareholders, Richard Hale. I recognized him from the framed photo Ethan once kept on our mantle. The kind of family portrait that says this is who you answer to. They came themselves. I whispered. Joyce backed away from the window. They don't delegate when it matters. A second later, the front entrance shook, someone forcing it open. Cold rain gusted inside with the smell of wet asphalt and metal. Ethan stepped into the shelter like he owned it. His eyes found me instantly. Emily, he said gently, as if I'd simply wandered away from home. You've made this complicated. I stared at him until my teeth stopped chattering, until anger steadied me. You destroyed my life. He gave a small laugh, almost affectionate. Your life was never yours. It was temporary. Joyce moved between us. She's under federal protection. You need to leave. Ethan's gaze slid over Joyce like she was paperwork. This is beyond your authority. Ma single quotes AM. Richard entered behind him, unhurried. He carried a folder thick, sealed like mine. Dr. Evelyn Cross created an asset, Richard said. Voice smooth, practiced for boardrooms. She stole it. We're retrieving what belongs to Helio. I'm not an asset, I snapped. I'm a person. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. You're both. That's the problem. Claire stepped forward, eyes unreadable, flat in a way they'd never been when we were children. Don't make this a scene. Come with us. You'll be taken care of. I let out a bitter sound that was almost a laugh. Taken care of? Like you took care of my job, my home, my parents? Her expression cracked for just a second. You don't understand. They were going to find you anyway. At least this way, you're on the winning side. I finished for her. Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a syringe. Clear liquid catching the fluorescent light. Quick sedative. he said, like he was explaining medicine to a child. You'll wake up somewhere safe, somewhere properly equipped for someone like you. Joyce's voice shook. Put that down. Ethan's smile sharpened. And who's going to make me? Then a voice thundered from the hallway. FBI. Step away from her now. The next seconds fractured into noise. Agents surged in from a side entry, weapons raised. Tactical lights cutting through the room. People screamed and dove for cover. Someone knocked over a chair. The shelter became an echo chamber of commands and panic. Ethan spun with a pistol already in his hand. Gunfire cracked violent, deafening. Plaster exploded from the wall behind the intake desk. Joyce grabbed my wrist. Move! She yanked me down behind the desk. We crawled, low and fast, through scattered papers and broken plastic bins. Glass shattered somewhere to our left as a window blew out. Over the chaos, I heard Ethan shout, furious, frantic. Not the head. We need her alive. A hot sting slashed across my arm. Pain flared bright. Then warm blood soaked through my sleeve. I clenched my jaw hard enough to taste metal. Joyce shoved open the rear exit and pushed me into the alley. Rain hit my face like needles. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. A dark SUV slid to a stop inches from the curb, tires spitting water. The driver's door opened and a tall man stepped out in a trench coat. Badge glinting under the STREETLIGHT. Director Mason Blackwood, he barked. Miss Wargidden. Now. Joyce helped me into the back seat. Blackwood slammed the door, climbed in, and the vehicle lunged forward, fishtailing onto the street. For several blocks, no one spoke. My arm throbbed. My breathing came in shallow bursts. My mind kept replaying Ethan's voice like a recording. We need her alive. Finally, I whispered. What am I? Blackwood met my eyes in the rearview mirror. His face was hard, but not cruel. You're proof, he said. Dr. Cross's work succeeded. Your cells regenerate at a rate that defies modern medicine. I stared down at my bleeding arm, trying to understand what defies meant. He continued, if Helio controls you, they control the template. They don't want to cure people, Emily. They want to sell access. They want to make longevity a product and decide who qualifies. Immortality, I murmured, sickened by the word. Or something close enough to market as immortality, Blackwood said, and the world will beg for it. Rain streaked down the window, turning the city lights into blurred smears. My mother died trying to stop them, I said. She bought you 25 years, Blackwood replied. Now you decide what to do with the time she gave you. It didn't feel like an order. It felt like a door opening. I pressed my bleeding arm to my chest and watched the shelter fall behind. US in the distance, the place where Emily Ward had walked in looking for warmth and accidentally found the truth. I'm done running, I said. Blackwood's gaze softened a fraction. Then you'll need to understand something. What your mother started wasn't a scandal. It was a war. And somewhere behind us through sirens, rain, and gunfire, I could almost still hear Ethan yelling my name. Not like someone calling for a wife, like someone chasing stolen property. For the next 72 hours, I didn't exist. Blackwood's team moved me to a safe house outside the city. Concrete walls, reinforced doors, windows that didn't open. The kind of place that doesn't feel like safety until you realize how badly people want you dead. Or worse, owned. A medic cleaned my arm wound. The cut should have been ugly. Instead, it tightened and closed with unsettling speed. The medic's eyes widened. He tried to hide his reaction. He failed. Accelerated tissue repair. He muttered to himself. Like naming it would make it less impossible? I didn't care what they called it. I cared that Ethan's father thought my body was a business plan. On the third night, Blackwood entered carrying 2 folders and dropped them on the table in front of me. One was stamped new identity package. The other read Helio Biosystems open case. You have choices. He said, you can disappear. New name, new face, new continent. We can bury you so deep even Helio won't find the grave. He tap the second folder. Or you can help us finish what Dr. Cross tried to do end the program permanently. I stared at the Helio. File Ethan, Claire, Richard, the signatures, the shell companies, the financial threads connecting everything. What if I want a third choice? I asked. Blackwood frowned. Explain. I looked up and met his eyes. Not disappear. Not just testify. I want to end them from the inside. A long silence filled the room. He studied me the way you study a storm cloud, assessing whether it's safe to stand there. Then he nodded once. We do it clean. We do it legal. And we do it final. 6 months later, Emily Ward died. The official report said I was killed during the attack on Street Mercy Shelter. Closed casket. Minimal press. A tragedy with a neat ending. A few former co-workers attended the funeral. My parents came, their faces stiff with confusion and grief they didn't fully understand. Claire showed up dressed in black, clinging to Ethan's arm, performing heartbreak for anyone who might be watching. They didn't know I stood across the street beneath a plain umbrella, face shadowed, listening to the words, spoken over a box that didn't contain me. The obituary called me a bright young woman taken too soon. Part of me wanted to believe that was true because the person watching that funeral wasn't bright or young or anyone's wife. She was empty of soft things. She was useful. My new name was Alyssa Granta, consultant in biomedical logistics. Resume engineered by Blackwood's division to fit Helio's hiring appetite perfectly. Credentials verified. History manufactured. A background so believable it had boredom baked into it. 3 months later, Helio hired me, directly under Richard Hale. Helio's headquarters looked like power always does. Glass walls, white floors, silent security, and employees trained to smile like nothing illegal had ever happened inside those walls. I moved through it like a shadow with a badge. Ethan didn't recognize me. Different hair, neutral makeup, colored lenses. A voice lowered and steadied until it didn't sound like the woman he'd once dismissed as too emotional. But just once his eyes lingered on me half a second too long. A flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. It told me something important on some level. He knew the truth could come back wearing any face. Within weeks, I had access to Project Testament Revival. And it was worse than the file at the shelter had suggested. Unauthorized human trials, disposable subjects, genetic replication attempts that read like horror disguised as science, internal emails using words like units and yield, a spreadsheet tracking failures the way you track broken lab equipment. They weren't trying to recreate me as a medical miracle. They were trying to mass produce me as a commodity. Every night, I copied what I could, encrypted it, and routed it through dead drops to Blackwood's team. But evidence alone wouldn't stop men like Richard Hale. Men like that didn't fear truth. They feared spectacle public collapse, investors fleeing, criminal charges that couldn't be paid off quietly. Then the invitation arrived. Helio Annual Research Gala. Private donors, media, government partners. A glittering stage where monsters wore tuxedos and toasted their own brilliance. Perfect. The night of the gala, I wore a black gown and a silver mask because Helio loved pageantry. Their cruelty always came dressed as celebration. Ethan floated through the crowd. Charming investors, selling the future with a practiced smile. Claire stood beside him in emerald green, glittering and hollow at the same time. She looked like a person who had won something and secretly hated the prize. When I approached, Ethan turned to me with polished warmth. "Can I help you, miss?" I tilted my head slightly. "You already have." The blood drained from his face so fast it was almost satisfying. His mouth formed my name like it physically hurt. "Emily?" I smiled behind the mask. Not exactly, but close enough. Before he could recover, sirens wailed outside the building. The ballroom doors slammed open. Federal agents poured in badges, cameras, warrants clutched in gloved hands. A A loudspeaker cut through the music like a blade. Richard Hale, you are under arrest. Crimes against humanity. Illegal genetic experimentation. Corporate conspiracy. Human trafficking. The room exploded into screams and camera flashes and frantic movement. Donors backed away like they could outrun their own complicity. Richard tried to slip through the crowd, his instinct still corporate. Still convinced he could negotiate his way out of anything. Agents swarmed him. Claire screamed when two agents grabbed Ethan. He fought like a man who'd never been told no. Until they forced him to his knees and the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. I stepped close enough that he had to look at me. His eyes were wild disbelief, rage, and something thin that might have been regret. You ruined me, I said quietly. He swallowed hard. Emily, please. I leaned in, voice low enough that only he could hear. You didn't ruin me. You revealed what you were. Then I straightened and walked away while his final words drowned beneath the sirens. By midnight, Helio was finished. The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Biotech giant exposed. Genetic program illegal, global outrage. Helio executives arrested live at gala. Footage looped on every channel. Richard Hale led away in handcuffs. Jaw clenched like the world had betrayed him. Ethan pale and shaking. Claire gripping her designer purse like it could still buy her a way out. For the first time in years, I watched the news without fear because my real name wasn't on any of it. Emily Ward was dead. Alyssa Grant was a ghost. Blackwood's team debriefed me for days in a quiet facility. He said Helio's collapse had triggered international investigations, new biotech oversight, and an emergency ethics commission with actual enforcement power. Whistleblower pipelines, protected research labs, public audits with real consequences. He didn't say my mother's name much, but I felt her in the shape of every consequence. One afternoon, Blackwood arrived with a small silver box. We recovered something from the original site. He said inside was a scorched USB drive and a folded note. Yellowed with age. My hands trembled as I opened it. The handwriting was elegant, precise, someone accustomed to lab notes and life or death decisions. If you're reading this, my Lydia, you lived. Forgive the lies. Forgive the fear. I couldn't save the world, but maybe you can. Don't let them turn life into property. You were made for healing, not for war. My vision blurred. I pressed the paper against my chest like it could stitch something back together. I made it. I whispered to the empty room. I'm still here. Months passed. Richard Hale was sentenced to life for crimes that finally had names the public couldn't ignore. Ethan received decades for conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, and the violence at the shelter. Claire testified in exchange for a deal. Immunity isn't innocence, it's survival with consequences. The last report I heard placed her in a small apartment under a different name, working a job where no one applauded her charm or envied her beauty. Joyce refused interviews, refused money, refused to be turned into a headline. When I visited Street Mercy one evening, the shelter looked the same from the outside. Faded sign, tired brick, but a new wing was under construction. Heating systems upgraded, more beds, more counselors, more space for people who needed a second chance. Joyce only said, "You were never forgotten, Emily. You were postponed." Before I left, I slid an envelope across her desk, a donation large enough to keep the doors open for years. No signature. Just for anyone who needs a second chance. And Project Testament, what survived of it was rebuilt under international oversight. Restructured for what it should have been from the beginning. Treatment, not profit. Trials with informed consent. Transparent review. Healing made public instead of sold like luxury. Now I live in the quiet spaces. Not hiding, watching. I travel between research sites under identities that change as needed. Helping move treatments where they belong. Making sure no one with a clean suit and dirty intentions gets close enough to twist the work again. Some nights I still dream of a woman in a lab coat, smoke rising behind her, eyes full of urgency and love. I don't know if I'll ever stop moving, but I know why I'm moving now. Because the night I walked into Street Mercy Shelter, hungry and half frozen and stripped of everything I thought I was, I believed it was the end of my story. It wasn't. It was the moment I finally met the truth. And the truth is this: my name has been Emily Ward. Before that, Lydia Cross. Tomorrow it might be something else entirely. What matters is not what they called me. What matters is they were wrong about what I was. I was never their experiment. I was never their property. I was the daughter of a woman brave enough to burn everything she built to give me a chance at a life, and I intend to live it.